right, Mopar people, welcome back to the channel. I'm Justmoparjoe. So I've got my timing chain cover just bolted on here. This was actually on a different race engine. You can see where it's been indented right there. That was where the cam button will touch. So we got to set that cam button up today. Someone had added another ear on here just for, I believe it was timing with a 440 balancer instead of a 400. But this one, I'm on top dead center, and I double checked that. It is almost dead nuts. It's so close, I'm not even going to change that. It looks really good. So that was something I was concerned about before I move on to setting my camshaft in play. And that was part of my controversy here, is that my cam plug's already in, my cam is in. If you go check out Ed at Ed's Machine, he has a quick video on showing you how to set up your gauge here on the back of the cam and working with the cover back and forth to get it set up just right. I'm going to do it a little bit different. If you'll remember last time, I did find some good ARP bolts. I have not stuck my washers on yet, but I'm in the process of doing that now. There's one with the washer on it. I went ahead and dropped my shim in here because I'm using a nylon style button. There we go. And my little shim, whenever that washer's on, it may try to keep the shim from coming out. So I'm gonna go ahead and get these stuck in with a little bit of Loctite, and I'll come back to our button. Threw a little red grease on the ends of my bolts here, because it's kind of hard to tell that they are not, well, they're definitely protruding farther than the button. Check out that pattern. So off with the washers, and we'll go back on. All right, our cover's back on. There's our 3 washers and our button. And we have no touching here. I'm not able to run those washers with this. I've got them retorqued. You can see my little bit of red grease, 1, 2, and 3. And it is not on my cover. So back in with the button. Here's my button. It started with a lot wider shoulder there, and I took some of that off. So it has a nice slip fit into my shim, like that. And then I had to clearance the heads just under there a little bit, you see there? But what it's gonna do is actually contacting the camshaft now inside here. So it bottoms out on the cam instead of bottoming out on the gear. I think I like that better. A lot of people may argue with me on that, and we'll see if it doesn't work, I'll show it to you. But as we were, I'll stick that back in, and I'll grab my cover, get our cover slipped on here so we can see our cover is being held out by the button. When the button was gone, not there, the cover would go all the way down and bottom out on the block itself. So you see that little bit of rock? I'm going to take the rock out of it. Here's what I'm going to do. And y'all can call me crazy for this. So you're supposed to have 5 to 10 thousandths between the end of that button and your timing cover right there. What I'm going to do, and something inspired me to do this, I'm going to take the button down until my cover is totally flush. And at that point, I mean just barely flush, not sucked up real hard against there with any slack at all. Let me show you my gasket. Here's my timing chain cover gasket. This is actually a Cometic. Hopefully you can see that. I believe that's a very thin layer of metal inside there. But here I have my calipers. Let's get them set up to 0. And we'll take the thickness of that gasket right on our end there. It's hard to do with one hand. Right there. 15.5 thousandths, 15 thousandths. So obviously you can imagine there will be a little bit of compress to this gasket, just slightly. And when that happens, it's going to, when I put that gasket on, it's going to give me 10 to 15 thousandths clearance between the cover and the block itself. I'm going to use that amount of clearance between my cam button and the front cover. So I'm gonna get that thrown in right now. You let me know in the comments if you've heard of doing this way. Some people will say it's crazy. I've talked to 3 or 4 different people and they've all had different opinions on it, but in theory it will work. One thing I have to be wary of, these stamp steel covers will flex. This cover came off of a 440. You can see our rub there. It came off of a 440 that had a huge solid lift cam in it and ran for years and years and years at the racetrack. So you can see I still got some gasket material to get off there. But it's not grease. This is clean. It's a clean cover. I repainted it. And it'll be behind the water pump anyway, but she's pretty solid there. I know you can weld in a plate. You can buy a billet cover, etc. But I've literally seen this cover work for years and years with a solid roller cam. So I'm certain it will be just fine with my cam. And we're going to give it a go. So let me get this thing bolted up. I've got the stock bolts. I really like using stock bolts if you can find them. And we'll get this front cover put on today. So I've got this bolted up just real quick. I wanted to show you what the purpose of the cam button is before we get into all this. See where I'm dented in here? My dial gauge is on 0. And I'll take my screwdriver and grab a lobe. Obviously, I don't want to scuff the lobe. I'm on the opposite side of the lobe, far side. And I'm going to pry, and I want you to watch that gauge move. So currently my button is up against the gauge. See where it jumped? So right now, the stickiness or the budge of that cam, I don't know the proper term for it, the cam is pushed forward 10 thousandths according to this gauge. So I'm going to get my screwdriver back to there, and I'll push her back to 0, already there. But you can watch, if I keep prying, I can get it all the way up to 25. The cam's gonna be walking, watch. So I wanna get her back to 0 right now. So just all the way back. That means my cam gear is pulled back against the block. I'm gonna take my setup off. I need clearance between that button and the opposite side of this cover. And I'm gonna shoot for about 3 thousandths. So right now I've got it mocked up. I'm gonna take some off. I'll stick it back on and just sneak up on it one time. All right, stuck my button back in. Got my cover dry with no gasket anywhere. I wanna take another look. It's not just an instant thing by any means, but I think it's still faster than if I had pulled the cam all the way out or knocked that plug out of the back. Still got a little bit of rock right here. And that tells me I need to trim my button a little bit. So I believe I am close, and I have my button here if you want to see what the face of it looks like. I just laid it on a flat file. I filed, I spun it, I filed and spun it. Got a little bit of red grease. I'm gonna lay right on the button and make it a very, 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 very thin film of grease. Just like that. Sticking all that back in. There we go. Gasket and cover on. If I pull the cover and there's no grease, then I know there is a very tiny gap between the cover and the button. If there is grease, I pull it, I sand it, I repeat. Nice and slow. There we go. Remember, my gasket's about 15.5 thousandths thick. Those are fine. I can put the bottom 2 in if I get nervous. Should have brought my tripod in. The verdict says there's just the finest little bit of grease on that. So I need to go a little shade more. you can see the end of my button, how it's smashing that grease down. I'll get her sanded up. I bet I can hit it this time. Now, coming off. I think I'm there. Look through. My button is still hanging in. Good. Pop that cover off. No grease. So that means officially our button is not touching the inside of the cover. So I'm gonna do one quick bolt up, get my gauge back on here, and we'll see how the flex. Okay. So I have not touched our cam. I will be sure it is all the way back. Right there. My gauge. We are just before 0. Get you the right angle. There we go. Now I will take my screwdriver. If you remember, whenever I pried that little bit of stickiness out before, it was at 9 to 10 thousandths. So let's see what our difference is here. Gotta move back some. Zoom on in. 7 thousandths. We can try it again. Push back. Actually just before the 0. There we go. And I will pry her up. About 5 thousandths. So I'm somewhere between 3 and 4 thousandths between my cover and my cam button right now. And I think after I put my RTV on, that'll give me just a little shade more clearance there. But we gotta have some clearance, because whenever the oil and everything else runs down, 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 I got a gear in here that I'm not using, obviously, because it's not bronze. When the oil all runs down, there needs to be oil. There has to be a little bit of space between the button and the cover so it doesn't eat the cover up. As the engine runs, the cam was actually going to walk back and forth. I don't know if you can see that tiny amount or not, but it will be walking over and over and over. So that's why a lot of people go to a billet cover. But again, this one's ran on a roller 440 for a long time. I may consider shimming between my cover and water pump. I'll get creative with that, see what I can do. But until then, this cam is ready. Hopefully that'll help the home engine builder like myself out there. And if you got a different way, post that in the comments for us. I appreciate y'all watching. This thing's gonna be a springer.